American history students? This is Mr. Bell coming back at you with another video lesson. Today we are going to cover American History 1, sections 4.1, the era of good feelings, and 4.2, which delves into some of the more controversial stuff of Andrew Jackson's presidency. We're covering two sections because 4.1 is rather short. So James Monroe, he takes the place of James Madison. He's our fifth president, and his presidency, the two terms, is known as the era of good feelings. There are no political parties. After the Hartford Convention, the Federalist Part, and the death of course, Alexander Hamilton at the hands of Aaron Burr, the Federalist Party has died out, and for a very, very rare time, we have no political parties except for the Democratic Republicans. This is extreme nationalism. We beat England twice in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. So we are going to be left alone by them from then on. And James Monroe's presidency is generally remembered as a very positive time in American history. So the two things that James Monroe's presidency is remembered for is the Monroe Doctrine. You may have heard the song, "This land is our land, this land is my land, from California to New York Island." Now, that's an easy song to apply to the Monroe Doctrine. That the Western Hemisphere, in other words, the side of the earth that America, the United States, is on, this is American territory. So French, get out. Native Americans, get out. British, get out. Spanish, get out. This is now American territory, as in the United States of America. The cartoon, of course, you have Uncle Sam standing on the Western Hemisphere. This creates extreme nationalism. A doctrine is a president's beliefs, usually relating to foreign policy. And this says that this side of the hemisphere is now going to be controlled by America. The RushBagging Agreement. So, at this time, most of Canada was controlled by England still. You had the Great Lakes, such as Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, dividing, of course, America from Canada. England had several warships. We had several warships. We were afraid that there's going to be some type of exchange of fire in the Great Lakes between England and America. So what we end up signing with them, thanks to President Monroe, is the RushBagging Agreement. They're allowed one warship in the Great Lakes, and we are allowed one warship in the Great Lakes. Keeps peace between us and England, avoids what could have been a third war between the two of us. We're going to go to 4.2. This is where we really get into the antebellum era, which is the period of American history leading up to the American Civil War. Henry Clay, he will run for president. He is one of the most famous politicians who have never been president, not quite on the Hamilton and Franklin level, but still very important. He's the Speaker of the House in the early 1800s who comes up with something called the American system. He says America needs to do these three things to prosper early on. Preserve the national bank. It creates a stable currency. It stabilizes the economy. Promote tariffs, tax on imports. That encourages people to make and buy American. Internal improvements. Quit worrying about squabbles around the world. Quit worrying about England. They're going to leave us alone now. Let's improve and develop what we have, such as the roads, bridges, and canals. And he is the Speaker of the House from Kentucky. So in 1824, you have what becomes known as the corrupt bargain. The election of 1824 sees Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams, son of John Adams, Henry Crawford, and Henry Clay run in a four-way race for president. The results come in, and what you see is that Jackson won. However, John Quincy Adams argues against this. He says if you take his votes, Crawford's votes, and Clay's votes, they actually have a majority, which is more than half, whereas all Jackson has is a plurality, which means the most. So he calls for the election to go to the U.S. House of Representatives, and that's what ends up happening. In the House, you have Clay say, I will trade my votes. In other words, people in the House who are going to vote for me for president, what's going to happen is you're going to now vote for John Quincy Adams. And the deal was that Quincy Adams would make him Secretary of State, and that's exactly what happens. Clay trades his votes to Quincy Adams. He becomes president. He makes him Secretary of State. This infuriates Jackson, and Jackson basically spends 4 years campaigning up until the election of 1828 and bashing John Quincy Adams as an illegitimate president. And in 1828, he becomes President Andrew Jackson, which is what a lot of this is going to focus on in this section. One of the first things Jackson does is get rid of the property ownership requirement in order to vote. If you remember, he grew up dirt poor, so he wanted people like him, poorer people, to be able to vote who didn't own land, so he gets rid of that. So it used to be white male 21 owned land, now it's just white male 21. Jackson creates what's known as the spoil system. He feels so wrong by what happened between Clay and Quincy Adams, the corrupt bargain, that he says, I'm going to basically escalate this. So if you swear an oath to Jackson, if you help him get elected, you help him raise money, you're loyal to him in office, he's going to help you. If you help him raise a lot of money, maybe he'll give you a cabinet position. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. He values loyalty above everything else. And if you're loyal to him, he's going to treat you as good as gold. If not, he's coming after you. Andrew Jackson hated three things: John Quincy Adams, the National Bank, and Native Americans, Indians. And he's going to attack all three of those things during his presidential political career. He defeats John Quincy Adams, and then he goes after the National Bank. He says this government overreach. Jefferson should have dismantled it when he had the chance. So he breaks up the National Bank, and he takes all the tax money that's in it, and he divides it between the states. And the states are like, woohoo, money. Now, about half the states blow through their money quickly, so they come back to Jackson, the federal government, looking for a loan. He says, no, you had your chance, you had your money. Those states wasting that money creates an economic panic, which goes into a recession that was caused by Jackson breaking up the federal banks and instead having each state have a state bank or a pet bank. Jackson so hated it leads to the formation of a new political party called the Whigs. I know you guys have seen the pictures of like John Adams and stuff in Washington wearing the white powdered wigs. That had come and gone by the time Jackson's president. That's more of a late 1700 things. Now we're in the 1820s, but people start wearing wigs again as a sign that they're against Jackson. So the Whig Party is formed, and the new two-party system we have are the Democrats. Jackson's the first Democratic president, and we have the Whigs. Now, Martin Van Buren is going to be Jackson's second vice president. His first is actually John C. Calhoun, who he's rather close with. But John C. Calhoun's wife and Andrew Jackson's wife don't get along, so they have a falling out. Andrew Jackson replaces him with Martin Van Buren, who will be the 8th president following Andrew Jackson, only a one-term president. All the messes that Jackson creates through the Trail of Tears, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the Panic of 1837, they catch up with Martin Van Buren. He has to foot the bill for Jackson's mistakes. At this time, you start to hear about manifest destiny, which is the God-given right to settle west. Manifest destiny is the excuse that white Americans use at this time to take land from Native Americans. They believe they are God's chosen people. America is God's chosen country, and that gives them a green light to take land as they see fit. Part of this is the Indian Removal Act. Jackson actually passes this through Congress. It relocates the Indians onto a giant reservation in Oklahoma. Now, if you're willing to go voluntarily, things work out pretty well for you. You actually have very nice reservations, everything you need. But if not, it's not going to be so pretty. So this is where you get the Trail of Tears. The Indian Removal Act would force 4 big tribes, the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cherokee, and Seminole. You had other up here, Sac and Fox, but these 4 big tribes onto Oklahoma. If you went peacefully, then you were good. If not, Jackson was going to force the military to come to your home, force you out, and take you on a long journey, the military, forcing these Indians to Oklahoma. So, an Indian man, a Native American man in Georgia, last name Worcester, sues. It goes to the Supreme Court. The lawsuit is, hey, this is my land, this is private property, protected by the Fifth Amendment, eminent domain. He has no right to take this land just because I'm a Native American. So the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Native American, Worcester. And Jackson says, well, the Supreme Court may have made their ruling, but I control the military, so what can they do? He says Mr. Marshall, John Marshall, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. In other words, what are you going to do about it? And nothing. He abuses his power more than almost any president, not just that time, but all the history of the United States. So that's going to do it for 4.1 and 4.2. I know I covered that pretty quick, but I think you got the key points that should prepare you for a quiz on this unit. You're going to have a quiz on this unit at the end, not a test. So thank you so much. Email any questions you have for me to bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org. Thank you. Stay safe.